Hi, welcome back to this week's episode of the Modern Patient Experience with your host, James Furbush. My guest this week, very excited to have him on. He is Dr. David Lubarsky, the CEO of UC Davis Health and Vice Chancellor for Human Health Sciences. Dr. Lubarsky, thanks for joining this week.
Thanks for having me here.
Well, I'm excited. You are doing some great and exciting things at UC Davis, but I'd love for our listeners if you could give a quick intro and background on you and a little bit of overview, for those who are not familiar with UC Davis Health, just paint a picture of the type of organization it is and just sort of, give people some insight into what makes you guys unique.
Well, I'll start with just a little bit about me. As we were talking about just before the podcast started, I am a bon vivant, a foodie, a wino, a bike riding, exercising, and try and live well. And it's living well that is really the goal of every health system in the world. And I'm trying to make sure that everybody whose lives we touch gets to live equally well as I do, especially as they get older. My career trajectory, WashU and St. Louis, graduate from med school, became an academic anesthesiologist, a professor at Duke, and then the chair of an anesthesia department for many years at the University of Miami, where I also served at a large variety of roles, from being the senior associate dean for safety and quality to being the CEO of our 1,100 physician group to being the chief medical officer of the health system there before coming to University of California, Davis. So kind of a utility infielder, if you will, having different roles in a health system. And I think that's really helped me, as UC Davis Health has so much to offer in so many different domains. The fact that I've sort of seen health systems from the inside out and all around has helped me actually, I think, highlight what's great within the organization. I'll spend a minute, if I can, just talking about UC Davis Health. We've been on an incredible growth trajectory. The 3.5 years just under I've been here, we've been growing 1% a month. Our in terms of revenue, we've increased by more than 40%, and that's as a result of both taking care of much sicker patients, so each bed being occupied by acuity patient, and also by growing our volume, serving our community and our region ever better. We currently are at the level 1 trauma center for 33 of California's 58 counties. What's great about that is we're also an outlier, according to Medicare, in a good way. We're so far off the scale for morbidity and mortality related to trauma that we're outside the normal bounds that you would see statistically. That's how good our results are. So we not only serve wide swath of California, do it exceedingly well. And I will say this, my sister UCs, or brother UCs, as the case may be, we all belong to a large benchmarking group called Vizient that looks at our performance against other academic medical centers. And in terms of observed to expected mortality overall, 4 of the 5 UC health systems are in the top 10 in the United States. I mean, the level of work and quality of work that's being done in our organization, both at UC Davis Health specifically, but also at places like UC San Diego, UCLA, and UCSF, it's just at UC Irvine. It's amazing. As a 10th largest health system in the United States, the University of California is the most amazing public university there is.
Yeah, that's incredible, and such good oversight too. So before we get into it, I'd love, just to get a sense of you. I mean, you sort of said you want to help people live well, and I think that's like really important, right? And so for you, I mean, as CEO, what does that mean for you? I mean, how are you sort of bringing that ethos to your patients and that organization to sort of help your patients do just that? Not just get that sort of level 1 trauma care and all those things, but actually kind of live the lives that they want to live for themselves.
Right. So at the end of the day, there are different levels of interaction that an academic medical center can have in its local community, its larger community, its region, as well as serving as a role model for its own employees and staff. So, when I arrived at UC Davis, the quality of care was exceptional, but they were not organized, if I may say so, to really take advantage of new thought trends around the consumer characteristics of pain, and really being a patient-centric organization that brought care to patients where they wanted it, when they wanted it. So I hired the organization's first chief experience officer, who has been hard at work, really trying to impact our patients in a positive way, both across our digital platform, as well as the specific experiences they have on our campus, which is large, complicated as most AMCs are. That was one thing we did. The second thing we did was I hired UC's first chief wellness officer, and of course, the first one at UC Davis. And that person is a psychiatrist who has long been interested in staff and faculty morale, because you get better patient care if you have a more engaged and happier and more resilient workforce. So he's been tremendous in that. And then, of course, being culturally sensitive. I hired a new Chief Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer who has been leading the nation in the application of unveiling the difficulties that we have both in addressing our learners, how to make sure we avoid anything that approaches a microaggression within our walls, and then in extending ourselves to our patients. And we have a Center for Reducing Healthcare Disparities that has been hard at work in our walls, outside our walls. They just got a large grant from HHS to, via vans, deliver vaccines and information to Central Valley farm workers and Napa farm workers. So we're doing an amazing amount of work in terms of taking care of our patients, our community, and our community of employees. And that's all about living well, right? We're not actually, the actual quality of care is already taken care of, right? So we are sure that people are healing well, but it's everything else that happens around that, before that, and after that I think we could be doing better, and we are doing better in that regard. And then last but not least, you asked about, living well. Our local community is somewhat underserved, like many inner cities in the United States. And we have fully committed to becoming an anchor institution. We have a gigantic capital building campaign, about $5 billion building generational change on our campus, a couple billion in capital projects around the region. And we're really making a absolute and overt and explicit effort to hire local community workers, to get supplied by local businesses, to support our local farms in Northern California with our food services, a very large food service. That's the only hospital that ever win a James Beard Award. Our chef, Santana Diaz, did an amazing job. And so we're doing all of this while also being one of the top sustaining academic medical centers in terms of the environment and green practices. There's a organization called Green Practice Health that won an Emerald Award, which is the top award you get from them, joining about 50 other, and my sister UCs are all on that too. We're very committed to a sustainable environment. I'm very proud that as we bulk up on what we're doing for our community, we're doing it in a way that is going to benefit them now and for the next generation because of our commitment to contributing to climate change.
Oh, that's incredible. So I've got a lot of follow-up questions, but real quick, you said your campus chef has won a James Beard Award.
Yes. For sourcing sustainable at an institutional level. It's a big deal, actually, because we really want to deliver food to our patients. We talked a little bit about, what are we doing to make people live well, even when they're with us, right? And healing well, they can live well at the same time. So we're about to institute full room service. We have 38 different menus any one day. We deliver almost all fresh fruit and vegetables from local farms. About 80% of our produce comes from local farms with reduced packaging. It's super fresh. And now we're about to take the next step and actually deliver what patients want to eat, where they want to eat, when they want to eat. That's really important because, when you're in a hospital, very often patients feel like they've lost control. And to a certain degree, they have. They're dependent on their nurses, doctors, and on transporters to get them to and from a test. And then someone shows up with a dinner tray and it's sitting in the room and it's cold. And it's not exactly what they wanted to eat. And we're going to eliminate at least that source of frustration and make actually being in the hospital a little more joyous because, and a little more under their control when they get to order the food that they want and they get it delivered when they're actually in the room and it's still warm to eat it. So that make a big difference, in my opinion, in people's lives.
Well, like good food too, right? Like quality foods. I've eaten my fair share of hospital foods, and it's really oftentimes not good. You're like, do I want the chicken fingers or the pudding cup, and like what's going to be palatable? And
Yet,
it's funny because
particularly food. My chef used to work at a sports arena, so he was
okay,
prepared. He was very experienced preparing large numbers of meals. We make about 6,000 meals a day, and it's really good food. You want to eat in our hospital. It's it's not the equivalent of the TV dinner, at least not here.
yeah, that's amazing. And so jumping back to kind of what you were just talking about, obviously hiring, roles like a chief wellness officer, a DEI initiatives, these are things that really were not. I mean, I can't imagine there being a chief wellness officer at a large, academic medical center 2 years ago, 3 years ago. But in the last 18 months, things like these roles that you have created and hired for feel very relevant, very timely, very important in terms of charting that future course for the organization. Can you just talk about sort of like some of the other roles you're thinking about hiring for? Why did you sort of hire these?
Right. Well, one of the things, so I'm also a professor. I didn't mention this, but I'm a professor in business school as well, and have been at both Duke and University of Miami, and now here at UC Davis Health as well. I've always been at the edge of where business meets medicine, and organizational design and governance in health systems is an interest of mine. So when I got here, and one of the great things about being a CEO, the thing I love about my job the most, is that I get to actually see all of my ideas that are good. There are plenty that aren't so. But the ones that are good, after appropriate vetting, come to fruition. This is the way a modern healthcare system should operate, right? Which is, right, to make sure that everybody we touch feels valued, and feels valued not in a sort of condescending way, but feels valued as like, we really care about you as an individual human being with your own background, your own needs, and your own issues. I'm really glad that I pursued this early on in my tenure, because with COVID, how cool that a wellness officer would that important, but the resilience that our staff had to show in the face of, the onslaught of patients and the personal risk that they were taking, which again, I think has faded maybe a little bit from public view, but we should not forget the sacrifices and the bravery of our frontline healthcare workers who came to work every day not knowing if they were going to catch a disease we didn't fully understand, and yet they were still there for us. But having behind them a wellness officer, having patients who were, trying to figure out how to navigate getting healthcare when, a lot of clinics were closing down, not everybody was offering in-person visits, and to have a patient experience officer who can help our patients do that, right? And then, of course, the DEI work that we're doing, while it exploded onto the television after the George Floyd issue, it was was really, really prescient that we had put a very, very aggressive program into place for addressing diversity in our organization. As a matter of fact, U.S. News and World Report's first diversity ranking for schools of medicine came out this year, and we were ranked number 4 in the nation. And Forbes ranked us number 59 in the nation as a healthcare system, as a diversity employer among all large companies in the United States. So not just healthcare companies, but one of the top diversity employers in the entire United States. We're very proud of that, because, we live in a diverse community and we want to represent our community within our organization.
Yeah, that's incredible. I mean, congrats on that recognition. I mean, I think like having sort of some tangible proof that you're moving in the right direction, I think must feel good. I mean, I think certainly more than, are we making the right moves? Are we doing the right things to serve our community? And having that recognition is got to be a nice feeling for you.
Yeah. I mean, again, it's about doing stuff and not just talking about stuff. I took much of my entire C-suite, right, and dedicated a day to anti-racism training. And then we made, which it deals with microaggressions as well. I mean, there's very few overt people who would make it into the UC, obviously, who harbored those types of attitudes. But you'd be surprised about implicit bias and accidental microaggressions, which you may not be fully aware that you're perpetrating. Really, you need to train people. And so we not only did that for our high-level administration, every single course director across every single educational platform, Anybody who was a supervisor of large numbers of individuals has to undergo this training, in addition to the other training that we already do, like sexual harassment, et cetera, because it's not secondary to, it is to our performance as an organization. And the ranking stuff, we don't follow rankings per se, but what it tells us, as you said, is that we're moving in the right direction. If we see someone's doing a better job than us, then we say, hey, what can we learn from that other organization so that we can do as good a job, right? It's not the rankings themselves that matter. Yeah, that you want to make direction.
Yeah, that's great. So I want to kind of get back. I didn't mean to go so far off the track. Not talking necessarily specifically about the patient experience, but you had this great line. I think when we were previously talking, you sort of mentioned, that we can't accept that this is how it is in healthcare. And you said, ask optometrists how they feel about Warby Parker. Ask pharmacies how they feel about PillPack, or orthodontists with Smile Direct. So for your role as the CEO, how are you sort of setting that vision and strategy for UC Davis to sort of be, I guess, maybe Warby Parker versus the optometrist? I'm not really sure in that analogy which one you want to necessarily be, but, certainly to sort of, I guess, really, but to not fall behind, right? Because I think there are so many changes that are happening, and it's so easy to either do nothing, right, and just be okay with the status quo. But I'm curious for you, how you are setting that sort of vision and strategy for UC Davis to really kind of lead it and be out ahead of the pack when it comes to, the experience that you are offering your patients.
Right. Well, that's a great question, because it is really easy to just have the status quo. I mean, doctors, especially, we're like people to move our cheese, right? We like things the way they are. We've spent an amazing amount of time getting educating and training ourselves to work within the system the way that it is. And, change is uncomfortable. Luckily, I happen to be a change management person. So, still for me, I'm a real Connor devotee, and I really believe that change is not only necessary, it's essential. And it's especially essential now. The pace of change in the technology and information delivery world has just exploded, and we're not quite keeping pace. So to that end, I hired another chief that didn't exist before. I hired a chief digital health officer, and I changed the name. Well, I should say he changed the name of our information technology office, Innovation Technology, because it's not just about the computers and running the electronic medical record. Those are very clearly part of the infrastructure that we have to do. But it really is about innovating around bringing latest applications and knowledge to the benefit of our patients. And so we now have an app formulary, which we're beginning to roll out on behalf of our patients, where we evaluate all the software that's out there for chronic disease management or whatever. And we say, hey, we think this is the best one. We're going to prescribe it. So we hired the organization, actually UC's first chief digital health officer, his job is to rethink the digital experience and its interdigitation, if you will, with the bricks and mortar world that we're living in. So we're not only building a brand new hospital called California Tower, it's $3.5 billion. We're actually putting money into our virtual hospital so that there is truly a continuum, that your care doesn't end when you leave our four walls, that we really are watching after you and your lab values and your physiologic variables after you leave our hospital, after you leave our clinics. And so, and doing it in a way that's not separate from the health system. I think that this is sort of the holy grail, if you will, of how we take better care of patients and the patient experience, is we only do inside of bricks and mortar that which needs to be done inside of a brick and mortar workplace. And there are some things, right? You can't have an MRI necessarily in someone's home, but can you monitor their heart rate in real time for a couple of weeks with a Band-Aid size device and have a machine analyze, 1 million heartbeats in the period of a few minutes? You can. And so, the immediacy of feedback, the richness of information that we share, the longevity of that information by making it available in electronic formats, so you don't have to remember what the doctor said, the delivery of care and care groups in terms of discussing your disease process, having support groups, all those things are managed now via a digital interface. And we can do so much better than we've done before. we can learn from what happened in the pandemic, right? We no longer have to bring suffering from diabetes who want to discuss their diet management of their type 2 diabetes. They can join together on a virtual town, right, or a virtual support group. And it's these types of things we really want to bring to our patients, because the whole idea is, as Tom Lee, one of the editors of the New England Journal, did an editorial many years back now about bringing the world of suffering to a close. And by suffering, we don't mean just pain or somatic suffering. Suffering occurs from anxiety, from a lack of knowledge, from delays in getting information, and feeling a loss of control in it. And so we can use the digital platform we're building to reduce any of those types of suffering that our patients have, while doubling down, of course, on making sure we're treating them as well as we can, so that when they're actually in our care, their suffering is minimized as well.
Well, and I think like convenience too, right? I mean, like, I think like patient access is still such a hard challenge. You know, if you can't catch the public bus that like goes to the doctor, like, I think some of those challenges we take for granted, transportation, you know, just getting access to quality of care is still there. And so being able to sort of provide that digital experience and giving access that way, I think, right. I know patients, like, people want it, right? They just want that in some ways. And it's smart business, I think, for you guys to be able to extend out and kind of meet your patients where they're at in that regard as well.
Right. I mean, we're a unique organization here in Northern California. We're the only academic medical center between San Francisco and Portland, and between the Pacific Ocean and Salt Lake City. So, yeah, large swath of people who depend on our subspecialty services. It's not always easy for them to travel. So not only is there the cost of travel and the time of travel, but it's just, you know, what your loved one has to stay, you know, inside of a hospital, or you have a question and you've gone back to a rural home site. This is really a problem. So the pandemic, which really tremendously accelerated the use of virtual visits, I think will be great for rural communities. It will absolutely be an equity play, because, as you've mentioned, you know, maybe you can't catch the public bus. Maybe you don't have paid time off, because the lowest paid workers don't have 30% of America doesn't have paid time off. I think that was the number I read, and I'm shocked. I mean, the world I live in, everybody has paid time off, and healthcare is considered definitely a right when you're working in a healthcare system.
Yeah.
But that's not the way it is for everybody. So the ability to break healthcare right to people during their lunch hour, after work, where they don't have to spend the money or the time to do that, or especially for so many of the home caregivers now, where, you know, you have patients either with chronic disease or perhaps dementia, where a caregiver is required to be in the home. It's difficult for them to bring their loved one in for their visits, and it's not always necessary to do that. It's also difficult for them to get their own health care, because they can't leave their loved one with it. So by bringing virtual visits into the home, by bringing monitoring into the home, by having e-communications about questions, you really actually make healthcare much more equitable, because people like, I have a nice job with the University of California. They give me a ton of time off if I'm sick, right? But that's not the case for everybody. So this is going to be really important to level the playing field in terms of, as you said, for access for people.
Yeah, that's incredible. Yeah, I take for granted, and I always say this too, it's like thinking about other people where it's like, I'm just a middle class white guy who, you know, has been privileged enough to like be able to work from home during the middle of a pandemic, and my life hasn't shifted radically as a result. But for a lot of people, that's not the case. You know, do you have like the 2 or 3 biggest challenges that you are working through right now at UC Davis related to the patient experience? I mean, it sounds like you've got a lot going on and you've put a lot of great stuff in place, but, you know, I'm curious, are there a few things at the top of the list that you are really kind of want to solve for in the coming months and year?
Well, there are, you know, no organization, believe me, is perfect. The organizations with a long and a rich history also do things in a certain way sometimes that are forward looking, right? So the 3 things that are greatest challenges is number 1 is we have too many people who actually need us. And we've had to triage requests for transfers into our organization. We simply run out of space. And so we are really working to find partners. And one of the big changes in course when I got here, when we used to compete with the other health systems in town. And I went to all of them, you know, and I said, we don't really want to do that, because we actually don't want to do a hernia, you know, if you need one. But, you know, that's not what we do, right? We do repairs of we're a comprehensive stroke center, an MI center, where, for acute MIs, we're a trauma center, we're the seventh largest kidney transplant center in the United States. That's what we should be doing and growing back. And, we're a comprehensive cancer center, and we do advanced CAR T therapy and things like that, and do stem cell and gene therapy. And so we set ourselves up to complete and not compete with other ones. And that's worked so well, because now they're not, to be honest, the health systems aren't afraid of sending us patients. We would send them back as soon as humanly possible because we're really busy. So we're seeking partners to actually help us take care of some of our lower acuity patients.
Yeah.
Lower acuity setting, which is a community hospital. And so we're continuing to forge great partnerships. And I think those are going to come to fruition in the next few months. If we can then unlock some of the beds in our hospital, the very long wait times we have in our emergency department can be effectively dealt with. Right now, we do not have tremendous throughput, and we would love to be able to send people to urgent care or next day appointment. But again, we're the go-to place for an emergency room in this target reached. And so we need to be able to transit people quickly through the emergency department to their admitting bed. And that only can happen is if we unload some of our overcapacity patients to a place that's different than us, where they can get the same level. So those are two major initiatives that we're working on. And then we're also looking to prevent the people experiencing homelessness using the emergency department as a primary source of care. We are really working to extend care into those communities so people can get their care that they need in comprehensive fashion, either in the form of a campus built to provide that care. I was just talking to our mayor about where that might be sited, or in the meantime, via mobile vans, so we can bring care as individuals. They don't, we're spending a ton of money. People think that people experiencing homelessness are uninsured. It's not true. We studied the 3,200 individuals who were homeless who came to our ED this year, 3,200 unique individuals, 97% had insurance. So, but we weren't really helping them, right? Because what they really needed was chronic ongoing outpatient. And that's not what they were getting. They were getting expensive emergency. So that's very high on my list to work with our city and county officials to begin to provide the comprehensive wraparound services, includes behavioral health, substance use disorder help, and regular medical care for diabetes and other things that we need to do together as a community. So that's really high on my list as well. And that will then allow us to take care of the more acute patients in our emergency room, those who really need to be in the emergency room, rather than those who need much better care on an outpatient basis. So those are high on my list. I think they have tremendous community impact and will make the care in our region even better.
That's huge. So that's fascinating to me, that when you studied homeless patient populations coming into the emergency room, most of them did have some form of insurance. But I would think, again, when they think about where to go to care, 2 in.the morning, if they need it, the only place that's open is the emergency room. I'm not even sure what my follow-up question would be to that. I just find that, are they getting insurance through from the government payer, or it's not private?
No, most of them are Medi-Cal, but it's Medi-Cal in California. So they all have private insurance.
Okay.
Who are at risk for those expenditures. So I'm hoping the new waiver, CalAIM, that allows monies from Medicaid to be spent on services that social influencers of health, such as housing and care navigation, helping people get to their outpatient appointments, transportation, those things don't really exist right now. And so why did people find their way not only to my emergency department, but many emergency departments around town? The sad thing is we're not really helping them, right? We're not curing their disease by meaningful manner. We're just stabilizing them. And eventually they end up back where they were, in a revolving door situation, which churns money and doesn't actually accomplish the goal of making those lives better. So we're really focused on that, right?
Yeah, I would imagine it's trying to be more proactive instead of reactive, right? When they come through the doors and it's like, okay, I'll treat your frostbite or whatever it is, and send them on their way, versus really kind of providing that holistic care. But we should check back in 6 months to a year. I'd love to get an update on the progress of that program. That's incredible work. So, I'd love to talk about, we've talked a lot about change management, the changes that you going on. I always think this is such a fascinating thing for, at least at the CEO, C-suite level, kind of dealing with that change management and, like navigating change is really hard. Getting employee buy-in, getting patient buy-in. I feel like this is something that executives everywhere struggle with. And so what advice do you have for other executives who are looking to be change agents or implement some of these patient experience changes? And, what have you learned as you've sort of gone about this journey, getting employee buy-in and getting people to kind of move in the direction that you want to move in?
I think an organized approach is the key to everything. And there are a couple of classic books that really, if you haven't read them in the last few years, worth reading again, which are Getting the Yes by Fisher and Urey, which is, a book on negotiations about how to, get to people, so if you want to move people, sometimes you have to negotiate with them. You can move them off of their positions if you truly understand what their interests are and solve for your interest and their interest in a win-win solution. So that's a great book. Kotter's, 8 Steps of Change. It's a classic and it's great. And you go back to that and you make sure you have the right guiding vision and you build the right team and you communicate. Those things are never old. And I just can't reiterate how important that was during the pandemic, because every day was a change management fire drill, because we were constantly, figuring out, how are we distributing PPE, or how are we toning down some of the work we're doing? What services are we maintaining? And which ones do we, can we afford to delay? That's real change when you're talking to an organization that's used to taking care of everybody who shows up at the door. Those rules and those steps of change really matter. We also put in a brand new funds flow model, which changed how every single department in our school of medicine is funded to align them better with the health system and to make sure we had the quadripartite mission, which used to be a tripartite mission of clinical care, research, education. Now we've added our social mission as a fourth leg of the chair.
Cool.
It's no longer a stool. Make sure we had dedicated funding and time for those efforts. And so we regashed all of that and we put a brand new clinical strategic plan together. We had, in both cases, hundreds of people providing input and making sure we were building the right guiding team and that there was broad engagement across the organization to support the implementation of both a new clinical strategic plan and a new funds flow model and a new organizational structure that we put in place when I got here, with some of which we've talked about. And then you have to make sure that there's not too much change.
Sure.
I would, we took a little breather during the pandemic from other gigantic large initiatives. As I said, we're about to embark on the largest building projects in University of California's history here on this campus and around. I think we're going to be following closely. Right behind us is UCSF. We actually all have to build new hospitals because of seismic regulations. So
Interesting.
Opportunity to really change our physical environment, which will, again, that requires amazing buy-in and contributions from every practitioner and every service and every nurse and every environmental services worker and food service workers to make sure that we're truly building the hospital of the future and building out our virtual hubs. And that changes physicians and nurses and allied health professionals will work in the future. And so we're about to launch into that. So UC Davis Health Next is, we've titled this, our new vision is Tomorrow's Healthcare Today, which is just, we want to make sure we're delivering not what people think is the cutting edge, but what people will think is the cutting edge tomorrow. Really getting out in front about being there for our patients, like I said, where they want it, when they want it, how they want it, and giving them a rich amount of information so they can manage their own lives and be in control of their own destiny.
That's great. Well, good stuff. So before I let you get going, because I know I've taken up a ton of your time and this has been amazing, we should check back in and schedule part 2 for sometime next year, because I'd love to kind of follow this journey that you're on. But real quick, where do you go to get kind of new ideas and inspiration? I'm just kind of curious, where do you go to kind of really kind of figure out what that tomorrow's healthcare, should be?
Right. Well, first thing I do is I watch William Shatner of Star Trek, and then I turn on the Jetsons.
Nice.
If you do, you'd realize we're very, very close to what they envision at the Star Trek sick bay or the virtual visits to your doctor.
Yeah, I just want the holodeck.
It's coming. Virtual reality and the metaverse and our ability to interact with our patients in 3 dimensions. it is coming for sure. And so that's actually where I go. I mean, I do a lot of reading. As a matter of fact, I think that reading, especially, and I'm not talking about only books, I do read books, but reading blogs of tech companies and summary articles in the Atlantic, or, just really just trying to pay attention of what's on the cutting edge. And then what is incredibly beneficial is I belong to two CEO roundtables that draw in national experts, both as guest lecturers, but there's only super smart CEOs around the table. One is called the Leadership Institute. It's run by Becky Harrington. The other one is CCI, run by Jeff Weiss. And those two roundtable structures bring me face to face with, in one case, almost all large system healthcare CEOs and their C-suite teams. That's LI. And then the CCI actually has a great mix of healthcare providers and payers and pharma and instrument companies and people on the fringes, tech companies, that when you interact with those people, they're so smart, right? I'm unashamed to be stealing their ideas on a regular basis and trying to apply them in our environment, and I'm thrilled when they take one of my ideas, because I think that that's what we CEOs have to offer, is not only leading our own organization, but sharing the things that are really working in our organization so they can be replicated. Because there's a lot to be done yet to bring healthcare into the 21st century, into consumerization, into convenience for our patients. And it's great to know what's worked and also what hasn't. So instructive.
Awesome. That's incredible. Well, Dr. Lubarsky, thank you for joining us. Thank you for sharing your wisdom and what you've got going on at UC Davis. It's incredible stuff. Can't wait to kind of follow your progress in the coming years. So thanks for joining us. And this has been very informative. So I really appreciate you making the time.
Thank you.